So we spoke earlier with His Eminence, Professor Richard Epstein, about the Supreme Court decision in the Trump immunity case. And just to get more reactions from the left of the unhinged variety, is there any other kind? I mean, for a former Solicitor General in Neil Cattell to essentially agree that this decision allows Trump to assassinate people willy-nilly. I mean, it's just something. It's something to behold, as is this. Representative Zoe Lofgren, she actually is an attorney, in addition to being a politician. This is what she had to say about the decision, taking it the other direction.
I guess, theoretically, President Biden, acting within the scope of his official duties, could dispatch the military to take out the conservative justices on the court, and he'd be immune.
Uh-huh. Right. Another officer of the court offering that ridiculous scenario. Maybe that's a bit of a fever dream of Zoe Lofgren's and many on the left. They're happy to see Bannon in prison, so he's shut up, not because of the contempt of Congress. Any means to get him to shut up. You've got the former mayor of Atlanta that wants the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to shut up and stop interfering with the election by publishing editorials she doesn't like. I guess that goes the same for the New York Times and Chicago Tribune, who all published essentially the same article, the same editorial, calling on Biden to step aside. This is the illiberal left. The official acts within your Article 2 powers, let me just repeat again, and you're not completely immune because there can be a disagreement over what constituted an official act based on something the president does, and the burden of proof would be on the prosecution, as is customary with sort of our constitutional norms about criminal prosecutions. But this is what you have to deal with, these hysterics, the histrionics. Van Jones, Obama suck toy, CNN contributor, he just took the political angle, but nonetheless offers sort of another description because, again, this is the only interest is in Trump. There's no ability to look beyond the tip of their nose here and think about the presidency and the republic. It's just, any means necessary to get Trump, and anything that impedes putting Trump in a hole is a threat to our democracy.
Basically, the question is, Supreme Court, do you more care about the unlawful conduct of a sitting president or possibly the unfair prosecution of a former president? That's really what they had to balance. They're obviously more concerned about the latter. And so I think politically, it's bad. It makes the Supreme Court look very partisan. They're supposed to be wearing these kind of black and white umpire jerseys or whatever. They look like they're wearing red jerseys or even MAGA hats. It's going to go down bad politically for the Supreme Court. But it's also scary because what is Trump going to do? If Trump gets elected and there's this idea that he can get away with even more stuff, that's really, really scary for the public because he already ran over every norm that he could. So it seems like, I'm just looking at this politically, not legally, politically, it's almost like a license to thug in a way. Like, you can do whatever you want, and the Supreme Court is probably going to let you get away with it. That is very frightening.
License to thug.
Like Joe Biden has a license to thug. Again, it's as you say, it's all about Trump. It's not about what's best for the country. I thought this was a middle ground decision, and it's being rejected.
Have you noticed?
People.
Right, and have you noticed that the Supreme Court wasn't partisan when Amy Coney Barrett wrote the majority, a terrible decision in the Murthy case?
Right.
That it's not. There wasn't partisan hacks then. It's only partisan when originalists on the court act in furtherance of originalism and in contravention to the activism that the left desires.
Dan, that's something you've been talking about that for years.
Yeah.
And
license to thug.
I think people are getting it finally.
I hope so.
I think they're getting it.
I hope so. I don't know.
Even on the left, the center left at least, is certainly thinking about it. I mean, the Supreme Court ruling affects presidents. They could be Democrats. They could be Republicans. Everything is focused on Trump, as you mentioned, and it's not about Trump. MAGA is not about Trump. It's a movement. It's the American people who are speaking, and they don't want to concede that.
Randy Barnett is Georgetown law professor. He's also the author of the new book, Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. Professor Randy Barnett, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Dan and Charles. I appreciate it. Kind of coincidentally, in my book, I talk about how I first met Richard Epstein when I was a law student, inviting him out to Harvard Law School to talk, and how we got to know each other, and he helped get me as a visiting scholar or a researcher at University of Chicago after I was a Cook County State's Attorney. So it's a coincidence that we happen to be on the air on the same airwaves this morning.
Would you like to come back and run for Cook County State's Attorney? We could use an upgrade. So, no, it's funny you say that because I meant to say this to Professor Epstein, but he's on the show pretty regularly. But I mean, one of the great joys of this job for me is to be able to speak to basically geniuses like Richard Epstein, people that are just so so just intellectual powerhouses, I mean, seminal minds in the history of the legal profession in this case. And certainly Professor Epstein qualifies, as do you. And so no, it's great to talk to you both. And we try to platform people that are more intelligent than us on this show. So your review of the Supreme Court's holding in the Trump immunity case.
Well, the people that are running around today with their heads cut off are the same people who are telling you that last week Joe Biden did very well in that debate because he had a cold last week, and that there's nothing wrong with this man. So you have to credit the source and ask yourself, how credible are they? And when they tell you to deny the evidence of your own eyes. Now they're telling you to deny the evidence of what the Supreme Court says. And I agree with Charles. This was a moderate opinion. At oral argument, which I listened to over the weekend, 2.5 hours of oral argument, the government argued that there were certain core presidential functions granted to the president by the Constitution itself for which he had essential immunity. The Trump lawyer argued that there were certain acts alleged in the complaint against President Trump that constituted private acts for which he did not have immunity. So the question then was just what are those acts that are in between those two things, not allocated to the president by express constitutional authority and also not clearly private acts. So it was a middle-of-the-road decision, but of course some people decided to interpret the majority opinion by reading the histrionic opinion of Justice Sotomayor in dissent instead.
Mm-hmm. Right, where she essentially says that this is a threat to the republic, this decision, because it makes, we talked about this with Epstein, it makes Trump or any president the king, but it expressly doesn't do that. And for a Supreme Court justice to ignore the existence of the other branches of government, the power those other branches of government have, the power that prosecutors still have if there is a question about something a president did that rises to the level of possible criminality, and you can present evidence to suggest it wasn't in keeping with his Article 2 powers. I mean, it's just not consistent with the declaration that Sotomayor offered.
Well, here's the deal. Here's the deal, Dan, as our president likes to say.
Mm-hmm.
We currently have a president who has used his Department of Justice to criminally prosecute his political opponent, the outgoing president of the United States. If it weren't for this Supreme Court decision, I would have expected President Trump, if he wins the election in November, to initiate an investigation of President Biden for acting illegally, for abusing his authority and abusing his power. So I think there might have been a criminal prosecution of President Biden for election interference by using his Department of Justice to interfere with the upcoming election. But this Supreme Court decision puts an end to that.
Well, this
Supreme Court decision is protective of President Biden should President Trump become the next president of the United States.
Well, this is my point. The point I've been making is both with 1512 and the J6 case, the Sarbanes-Oxley provision with respect to J6 prosecutions, and this immunity case. What it seems to me the majority in the court is trying to do is stave off this mutually assured destruction by way of political lawfare.
Dan, that's exactly what they're trying to do. That's so important. That is complete. There's been the court says that's what it's trying to do, and this Chief Justice Roberts does, and this has been completely lost sight of. They are trying to stop the downward spiral in which we turn into a third world country in which outgoing presidents get prosecuted by incoming presidents routinely. That's what's going to happen if that's not cut short. This opinion cuts that short. Notwithstanding everything that the Democrats say today, they're going to be asserting all of the limiting principles in that opinion in the future if President Trump were to do what I no longer think he will do, and that is prosecute Joe Biden.
I want to get back to that, but I wanted something else on this. So, you heard, I'm sure, that Trump has moved to have his convictions in Manhattan set aside because of this holding by the Supreme Court. But it doesn't seem to me that it seems to me those are private acts, even if that's a sham prosecution, which I think it was, that the Supreme Court holding in the immunity case is not applicable to the outcome in the Manhattan state case. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure, for sure. The Georgia case, I'm not sure about with the RICO Act they have there going. Who knows what's going to happen with that case?
We missed your answer. You must have cut out. We missed your answer on Manhattan. So Trump is off base in terms of anticipating that could be applicable to his convictions in Manhattan. Yes. Oh, Professor Barnett. Did we lose him?
I think we must have lost him there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I kind of wanted to answer that question. All right. Well, let's take a break real quick and see if we can get Professor Barnett back to answer that question so that we have confirmation of my instincts. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature supplements, changing the world one life at a time.
My name is Dr. Zhang. I'm a doctor of podiatric medicine.
My name is Todd. I'm a paramedic firefighter. I've been on the job for 28 years.
My name is Dr. Peter Munda. I'm a chiropractor in New York, Long Island.
I've been taking Balance of Nature for 23 years.
I love Balance of Nature, and this is definitely a product that I would recommend to other people, and I'll never stop taking it.
How many 70-year-old pictures, As far as Balance of Nature goes, I'll keep taking this stuff until the day I die,
I'm almost 55 years old, and because I have so much vitality, I can really enjoy the great outdoors. Our bodies are kind of like machines. If you do not give the machine the proper nutrition, it's not going to work very well. Simple as that.
Splash into your summer with our summer savings. Go to balanceofnature.com and get 50% off your first set as a preferred customer by using discount code Chicago.
AM 560, The Answer.
All right, we're back, and I think we have Professor Randy Barnett from Georgetown Law back. Professor?
Yeah, apparently the disinformation powers that be were just trying to stifle my voice.
Of course. So Trump's attempt to get the Manhattan conviction set aside using the Supreme Court decision on the presidential immunity, that doesn't make sense to me. What about you?
No, those were private acts by any stretch.
Right.
By the terms of this opinion, they were private acts.
And you were starting to address any potential impact on the cases the case against him in Georgia.
Yeah, well, you have a RICO count there that involves a conspiracy involving activity that the court is suggesting were private acts, at least an oral argument were private acts, communicating, for example, with the Secretary of State or communicating with governors of states. I don't know if they are or are not private acts, but the opinion gives plenty of reason to look at that case, and I should say that the opinion does not clearly address what should go on in that case, and we'll have to see.
Right. One other question I wanted you to address to this. I don't know if you saw it, but this op-ed from Professor Lawrence Lessig from Harvard in the Wall Street Journal about fake electors, because that's There are these prosecutions going on, too, that are not getting as much attention, but ordinary Americans being prosecuted in Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona for being part of the quote-unquote fake elector slates that the Trump campaign put together, Trump's lawyers did. And Professor Lessig goes back to the precedent set in Hawaii in 1960, Nixon v. Kennedy, where Nixon was declared the winner, but a recount, it went to John F. Kennedy. And then on January 6th of 1961, Vice President Nixon, overseeing the count in Congress, counted Kennedy's votes, not his. But both elector slates voted to ensure that if any potential recount changed the actual winner from who was declared the winner, then you had votes to properly count when it came time for the formal count, the January 6th count, if you will. And he said, so the standing up of elector slates and the pushing of elector slates, that is not illegal, and to prosecute these people is unconstitutional. That's Professor Lessig. What's your view on that?
Well, I've known Larry Lessig for many, many years. He is an independent-minded progressive, just the kind of independent person that Alan Dershowitz is, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I don't always agree with Larry, but he calls it the way he sees it, and I think there's a long history of this sort of thing. This is all an example of lawfare where you try to criminalize your political opponents by any means necessary, and you do so because you claim that the future of our democracy, in quotation marks, is at stake. That is a recipe for authoritarianism, and we need to resist that. The sad thing and the dangerous thing here is not the Supreme Court; it's what has happened to the Democratic Party. Which, when I was growing up in Calumet City, Illinois, which is a working class Democrat town, and I argued on behalf of Barry Goldwater in front of my junior high school class and my grade school class. The Democrats in that town today would be Republicans. Because they were sensible and they were generally conservative in their views. The Democratic Party has been taken over by the left, and we have a two-party system, and that is a very dangerous thing for this country. Just like the takeover of the Labour Party in England was a bad situation for them as well. We have to work ourselves out of that.
Randy Barnett is a Georgetown law professor. The new book, A Life for Liberty: The Making of an American Originalist, that's out today. A Life for Liberty is Randy Barnett's book. Professor Barnett, thanks so much for joining us, as always. Appreciate it.
It's always great to be on, Dan. Thank you.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro Answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Honey, what are we going to do with your grandparents' old coins and jewelry?
I'm pretty sure they're worth some money.
You've been saying that for years.
Okay, how about PGS Gold and Coin? They're the best when it comes to selling family valuables.
And you know this because...
PGS, when it comes to your valuables, they're the best.
Do that again.
PGS, when it comes to your valuables, they're the best.
Isn't that the place Jeff sold his grandmother's jewelry when she passed?
Yep, he checked out pgsgoldandcoin.com and found tons of positive reviews. He was blown away by how much he got.